Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling something that I think we all struggle with, those tricky teenage years.
Ah, the teenage years.
And luckily for us, we found this really cool guide that kind of breaks down what's going on in the brain during those years.
Well, not just the teenage years.
Oh, right. Yeah.
We've got the whole span of development here.
That's right. All the way up through early adulthood.
That's right.
So it should be really interesting to see how things change as they get older.
Yes. Development is a process.
It is. That's why we're here to deep dive on it.
Exactly.
So why don't we just jump right in? The first chapter in our guide talks about ages 12 to 14, those emotional roller coaster years. I think everyone who's ever met a 13-year-old can relate to that.
Yes, and there's a reason for all that drama.
Oh, do tell. I'm all ears.
Well, during this phase, the limbic system, the part of the brain that deals with emotions, that's incredibly active. Oh, yeah. Think of it like a control panel with all the dials turned up to 11.
Okay, so everything's just super intense for them.
Exactly. And here's the catch.
Oh.
The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and impulse control,
Right.
that's still under construction.
So wait, hold on. Their emotions are going haywire.
Yes.
But the part of the brain that's supposed to help them manage those emotions
Yes.
isn't even fully developed yet.
That's the tricky part.
Oh, man. No wonder those years can be so tough. Not just for the teenagers, but for everyone around them.
Absolutely. So you might see those sudden outbursts, that extreme sensitivity, the constant need for validation from their peers.
Yeah, all of that.
It's not that they're trying to be difficult.
Right.
It's that their brains are literally going through a major rewiring.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a little bit better, knowing there's a reason behind all the chaos.
It's important to understand the why behind the behavior.
It is.
Yeah.
But knowing the why doesn't always make it easier to deal with, right? Our guide actually has some pretty good strategies for navigating these choppy emotional waters. I like how it talks about validating their emotions, even if we don't really get what the big deal is.
That's so important.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, what might seem like a minor issue to us
Yes.
could be a huge deal to
A
them.
monumental crisis.
Exactly. So instead of brushing off their feelings, what does the guide suggest we do?
Try saying something like, hey, I can see that you're really upset about this. Let's talk about what's going on.
So you're not necessarily agreeing with them.
Right.
You're just acknowledging their feelings.
Exactly. And that can make a world of difference.
It shows you're listening.
Yes, and that you respect their perspective.
I like that. It actually reminds me of another point the guide makes, setting clear boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries are crucial.
But also, at the same time, allowing them to have some age-appropriate autonomy.
That's the balance we're aiming for.
Right. It's like, how do we give them structure, but also the freedom to, start making their own choices?
It's a dance.
It is. It's a real dance.
But it's an important one.
So, for example, what kind of boundary could we set?
You could say something like, you can go out with your friends after you've finished your homework.
So you're setting an expectation, but also giving them some control over their time.
Exactly.
I like that. So far, we've been talking a lot about parents, but what about teachers? I mean, they're dealing with a classroom full of these emotional roller coasters.
Oh, absolutely. And teachers have a huge role to play in supporting students during this phase.
For sure. Does our guide have any advice for them?
It talks about creating an inclusive environment.
Okay, so where everyone feels safe to express themselves?
Exactly. Think group projects, collaborative activities, things that build those social and emotional skills.
So it's not just about academics.
No, it's about the whole child.
And another strategy the guide mentions is praising effort over results.
Oh, that's a good one. Instead of just focusing on grades, acknowledge their hard work, their perseverance, even if they didn't get the highest score.
So instead of saying, good job,
Right.
you might say something like, I'm really impressed with how much effort you put into this. You didn't give up, and that's what matters most.
Perfect example. It's about recognizing the process, not just the outcome.
I love that. Those little observations can make such a big difference.
They really can. It shows that you see them, not just their grade.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with the 12 to 14-year-olds, but buckle up because we're about to enter the next chapter. Ages 15 to 18. Those years when independence really starts to take center stage.
Oh, yes. Things are about to get even more interesting.
Now we're getting into those years when they really start testing those independence wings. Ages 15 to 18. Craving freedom, pushing boundaries. It's a lot.
You're telling me. And remember that prefrontal cortex we talked about? Still developing?
Oh, right. The part that's supposed to help them, like, think things through before they jump in.
Exactly. Planning, impulse control, weighing consequences,
Yeah.
all those skills you need for adulting.
So they're kind of caught in this weird in-between,
Oh, hi.
wanting to be independent, but
But not quite having the brain power to manage it all.
makes sense why there's so much, like, tension during those years. So how do we, like, guide them without, totally crushing their need to explore and figure things out?
Well, our guide has this really interesting approach. It's about involving them in the decision-making process.
Oh, I like that. So instead of just, like, laying down the law.
Exactly. Try asking, what do you think is the best way to handle this? Give them a voice, encourage problem solving. You're actually helping them build those decision-making skills.
It's like turning a potential power struggle into a brainstorming session.
Exactly. Collaboration, not confrontation.
Our guide also talks about modeling resilience. I think this is so important, but it'd be great to hear a real-life example, to make it, like, relatable.
Absolutely. Remember, teenagers are always watching us, even when they pretend they're not. So, for example, I once completely bombed an important presentation in college.
Oh, no.
I was mortified. But instead of giving up, I sought feedback, practiced like crazy, and aced the next one.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Turning what could have been a really negative experience
Into a valuable lesson.
Exactly. Showing them that setbacks are normal. They don't have to define you.
And that perseverance pays off.
Our guide also mentions talking about values with teenagers. Why is this particularly important during this stage, do you think?
Well, this is when they're really figuring out who they are, what they believe in, what kind of person they want to be in the world.
It's like their internal compass is being formed.
Exactly. And having those open conversations about values can provide an anchor during this time of, like, major identity formation.
So instead of just telling them what to do,
Right.
we engage them in conversations about why.
The values behind the choices makes a big difference.
We've been focusing on the family dynamic, but what about teachers? How can they apply these insights in a classroom full of, these independent-minded young people?
Well, our guide emphasizes critical thinking skills. Instead of just delivering information, teachers can pose open-ended questions, spark debates, challenge students to analyze different perspectives.
I love that. It's like making them active participants in their own learning, right?
Exactly. And speaking of active learning, the guide also talks about connecting learning to real life.
Because let's be honest, how many times did we sit in class and think, when am I ever going to use this?
Right. But when you can show them how what they're learning applies to their future careers or interests, it becomes so much more engaging and meaningful.
So instead of just teaching algebra in a vacuum, you might connect it to budgeting or financial planning.
Skills they'll actually need in the real world.
Or how scientific principles relate to health and wellness.
Or historical events and current social issues.
It's all about making those connections.
Helping them see the relevance of knowledge in their own lives.
Okay, we've explored the roller coaster of emotions in those early teen years, and now we've delved into the challenges and opportunities of ages 15 to 18. But the journey's not over yet. Up next, we're entering the phase of launching into adulthood. Sort of. Get ready for ages 18 to 21. Back again.
Now we're diving into the 18 to 21-year-old age group. It's such an exciting time, but man, talk about overwhelming. They're stepping out into the world, figuring out college, maybe even starting their first real jobs. But, like, are their brains even ready for all that?
It's a tricky phase because, the prefrontal cortex is pretty much matured by this point.
So they can make those, like, grown-up decisions?
They've got the capacity for it, yeah. Better decision-making, planning skills, all those executive functions are sharper, but they're also dealing with a whole new level of stress.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
Academics, early career stuff, relationships getting more complex. It's a lot to juggle.
So they've got the brains, but life's just throwing so much at them.
And that's where burnout comes in. All right, it's like a recipe for it, almost. Our guide talks about shifting from that, like, director role to more of a guide during this phase. What does that even look like practically?
Think of it this way. Less telling them what to do.
Okay.
More offering advice when they ask for it.
So empowering them to, like, solve their own problems.
Exactly. You're there to support, but they're taking the lead.
So, like, instead of saying, you should apply for this internship,
you could say, have you thought about internships? What are your ideas for next steps?
it's subtle.
But makes a difference.
Gives them that space to own their choices.
Whoa.
Oh, and the guide also mentions encouraging self-care, which I think is huge.
Couldn't agree more. They're so focused on achieving, they forget to take care of themselves.
It's easy to burn out when you're running on fumes. Right. Any specific tips for, like, what we can encourage them to do for self-care?
The basics are always a good place to start. Enough sleep, eating well, moving their bodies.
Even if it's just like a quick walk or something.
Exactly. Anything to get moving, de-stress. And don't forget hobbies, things they enjoy.
Right, finding those things that help them recharge. Our guide also talks about staying connected, but in a way that respects their independence, which can be tough.
It is a balance. Regular check-ins are good.
Like, how was your week? That kind of thing.
Yeah, simple, but shows you care without hovering.
You're their cheerleader, not their drill sergeant.
Perfect analogy.
We've talked families, but what about the folks working with this age group? Teachers, employers, any advice for them?
Mentorship is huge. Connecting them with someone experienced who can offer guidance.
Like a senior employee mentoring a new hire.
Exactly. Helps them navigate that transition into the working world. And this age group is so eager to learn.
So giving them opportunities to grow professionally is key.
Training programs, leadership workshops.
Keep them challenged and engaged.
And of course, recognizing their achievements. A simple thank you goes a long way.
Showing them their work is valued. Okay, so we've covered 18 to 21. Last stop on our brain development journey. Ages 24 to 28.
Ah, now we're talking true adulthood. The prefrontal cortex is fully online. They're making those big life decisions.
Careers, relationships, finances. The whole 9 yards.
It's a time of stability, building that foundation, really going after those long-term goals.
But even with all that brain power, our guide points out that burnout is still a risk.
Oh, absolutely. They're juggling so much, it's easy to get overwhelmed if they don't prioritize balance.
So, like, practical tips for helping them find that balance.
Celebrating their wins, both big and small. It's easy to get so caught up in the next goal that you forget to appreciate how far you've come.
Stop and smell those roses.
Exactly. And financial wellness is huge EE at this stage. They're making big decisions, buying homes, investing.
So talking about budgeting, saving, long-term planning.
Crucial conversations to have.
And, of course, we can't forget work-life balance. It's not a luxury, it's essential.
It's about sustainability. You can't pour from an empty cup.
All right, we've talked about supporting them, but what about their employers? What can they do to create a work environment that supports both success and well-being?
Professional growth opportunities are key. Training, leadership roles, mentorship. Keep them challenged and engaged.
Create that culture of continuous learning.
Exactly. And just like with any age group, recognition is huge. A simple thank you can make a world of difference.
Showing appreciation for their hard work. And of course, any policies or programs that prioritize well-being are a huge plus.
Flexible work arrangements, mental health resources, wellness programs, it all contributes to a supportive environment.
Wow, this has been an incredible journey through the stages of brain development. We've covered so much ground, from those turbulent teenage years all the way to adulthood.
And it really highlights how much is going on beneath the surface, how these brain changes influence behavior at every stage.
The biggest takeaway for me is that understanding the why behind the behavior can make all the difference.
It's about approaching each other with empathy and compassion, recognizing that we're all navigating these developmental stages in our own way.
It's a lifelong journey, and having this knowledge is like having a roadmap.
And remember, it's never too late to learn and grow, no matter what stage of life you're in.
That's such a great point. We're always evolving, always facing new challenges. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the fascinating world of brain development. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and a newfound appreciation for those incredible transformations that happen from childhood to adulthood. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep those brains buzzing.